starting to get excited. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Glacial Geek Deep Thoughts, Thin Coats with me, Phil, the Glacial Geek. Today, I'm coming to you here from Savannah, Georgia, still, for now, where I am going to be today working on a company ancient for my Dark Angels, because this guy's been sitting primed for a long time, as far back as when I used to use green primer. So he's been sitting around waiting to be primed for a while, and now that they are pretty fantastic, I think I'm going to give it a shot so I can get him into my armies and my lists and give that a shot, because the idea of the ancient alone is pretty cool, and then you add on top of it the fact that he gives them a 2-up ballistic skill for shooting when they do get to shoot again is pretty awesome. So giving him a shot and giving him a paint job so that he can be played out there on the table. So that's what I'm going to be working on hobby-wise. As far as discussions go, I am actually going to be talking about... Right now my brain is completely set on the next couple weeks tournaments, because this coming weekend I've got the Siege of Augusta, which is going to be taking place in Augusta, Georgia. And it's a 2-day tournament. I think they're looking for 30-something players, I think, is the goal they're looking for. And it's going to be a 2-day tournament, 5 rounds, 5 or 6 rounds. I can't remember. 5 rounds, I believe. Up at, like I said, during the Siege of Augusta Wargaming convention. This is the first year they've had a Warhammer tournament during the convention. So it's kind of exciting. I'm pretty excited to be up there, give it a shot. A couple guys we're going up on Friday evening, and the tournament's going to be on Saturday and Sunday, so it should be a lot of fun. I'm pretty stoked about being up there, getting to do that. I'm a big fan of tournaments. 2-day tournaments are even more fun, and then you add on top of that, getting to go up there and just be surrounded by nerds for an entire weekend is always a good time. So that what I'm going to be prepping. I'm prepping for that, and then 2 weekends after that, I'm going to be going to LVO. So the countdown is beginning. So it's, what is it? If you watch this the day it comes out, it's 3 weeks from tomorrow. 2 weeks from tomorrow, I take off. Yeah, 2 weeks from tomorrow, I take off. If you watch this, ooh, that's kind of scary. So we'll see what happens. I think I've got a pretty decent list. I'll go over what I got for my list. I'm going to be bringing this list to Siege of Augusta, and depending upon how it does, I might have to tweak it to go into LVO. But the plan is to bring a Dark Angels, obviously. I'm going to be doing a battalion and a spearhead detachment. So the battalion detachment is going to consist of Ezreal. It's going to consist of a Primaris Lieutenant with a power sword. And it's going to have 3 5-man scout squads with bolters. So Jenkins is coming along for the ride. I've got 2 5-man Reaver squads with grav shoots, and they're going to have the heavy bolt pistols and combat knives. I'm also going to have a Primaris Ancient in there. I'm going to have a Dark Shroud with a heavy bolter, and 2 Razorbacks with twin assault cannons and storm bolters. And then I'm going to have that's the battalion detachment. Then for the spearhead detachment, it's going to consist of a regular lieutenant with a power sword, 2 mortise pattern dreadnoughts with 2 twin las cannons each, and 2 8-man Hellblaster squads. So I switched things up a bit. The list that you guys saw in the battle report against the Chaos, I had 2 9-man squads and had a plasma pistol on the lieutenant. Thinking it over, I had another battle that's going to be coming out. Actually, it's going to be coming out this Friday, I believe. So you'll see that battle report. I actually used the Hellblasters in conjunction with an Ancient and had a really good time. I really enjoyed the fact that every once in a while I could get, or statistically half the time, I get to shoot with them when they die, within 6 inches. And the fact that I'm already running them as kind of like a blob anyway around Ezreal and the Lieutenant, it would make it pretty easy to keep those most of them within 6 inches of the Primaris Ancient, so that they could get the benefit of his getting to shoot again. So basically, it's if my opponent is starting to whittle me down, most of the time the shots they're going to be firing are going to be within range of the Hellblasters anyway, because of the fact that they've got the 30-inch range. And if my opponent is shooting at them, they're basically going to be shooting at them within range of the Hellblasters themselves. So if they're dying, then I've got a chance to shoot back at them during their own shooting phase, as opposed to just dying and just being taken off the board. So I think, considering the amount of investment in my list that I'm making in the Hellblasters, finding space for another 69 points made sense to do it. And it also allowed me to put some Stormbolters onto my Razorbacks, which is always fun. A nice little extra bit of DACA on my main source of DACA. So that should be good. And we'll just see how it goes when I go to the Siege of Augusta. So I think it's going to be a tough tournament. A lot of the guys from down here are bringing tough lists, so I'm sure all the guys from up there are bringing tough lists, and I think some of the people from Atlanta are going. It should be a good time, and it should be a good test of my list to see how it does and see if there's anything that that I need to change. Because being able to play it over and over again with just the concentration on playing as opposed to recording a battle report makes a big difference. So it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. So that's kind of what my brain is on that. That's what my brain is on for these next couple weeks. But I'm going to be talking about something that kind of came into my mind as I've been building this list, as I've been thinking about these tournaments, as I've been prepping for these tournaments, is how do you adjust to a changing meta? So part of this game is that as the game ebbs and flows through different editions, through different rule sets, as different codexes come out, as different codexes, as different supplements come out, whatever it might be, the game changes from time to time. Sometimes greater changes, sort of like the change over to 8th edition. Sometimes less changes, such as when a new codex comes out, or when a new supplement comes out, or something like Chapter Approved comes out. But with all of these, there's always a change in the way that the game gets played. So, for instance, back in the day, Terminators were, the thing you went with, because you had to fail a 3-up armor save on 2d6. So the odds were you weren't failing those saves. They were going to march across the board and just be unkillable, which is what happens in the books. But, when you've got them on a game board, it can have a bit of a nasty effect to your opponent if you're running those. But as those things have changed, as more and more stronger and stronger shooty weapons have come into being, such as gravs, such as vast amounts of plasma, whatever it might be, Terminators, fell out of popular use, especially in the the more competitive scene. And a lot of these things, like I'm saying, I know I have to keep saying this, but apparently some people don't understand that a lot of these, what I'm talking about is in the competitive scene, because I run a lot of Terminators still when I'm just playing my battle reports, when I don't care about if I win or lose. But it doesn't mean, but in the tournament scene, you're probably not going to see me dropping Terminators on the LVO tables, just because of their inability to really, they're expensive for what they do, and they die, especially if you roll ones like I do, a bit too quickly to really be able to deliver the punch that they're promised oftentimes. So there are other more cost-effective ways of handling the targets that Terminators were good at handling with shooting or whatever it might be. So the meta changes as they say it. Even in 8th edition, the meta keeps changing with each book that comes out, with each FAQ that comes out, with each change in the rules that comes out. It changes. So, for instance, at the beginning of 8th, everyone was looking for what units to spam, what units that they could just abuse the new detachment system with, and suddenly you had 5 Storm Ravens was the meta at ATC, because of their ability to just effectively bring a lot of DACA to places that a lot of other units couldn't do, and it became the cost-effective unit of choice. And that's how all of it becomes. That's how a lot of these things are, is people find the most cost-effective way to run a certain unit. So that was what the people, that's what the meta was. And that was at the beginning of 8th edition. That's what the meta was. And then they changed the rules, put boots on the ground, so that if you only had Storm Ravens, you lost the game because you were tabled. You had to have something that wasn't a flyer on the table in order to count for, to not be tabled, essentially. Then, people started bringing Guilliman, and Guilliman was the only one that was of any use, and then Magnus and Mortarion started coming along, and the Smash Bros was just the two of them on the same list. Then there was the Malefic Lords were being there was a list out there with 8 Malefic Lords. There were Razorback spam, all the different things that people were trying to bring as much as they could to bear during the same list. And each time things changed. So new codexes came out with other rules. As more codexes came out, people realized that the stratagems became more and more important. Certain units had their buffs changed, such as conscripts were the king of the table for a while there, and then they just got essentially nerfed off the table. All of these things occurred throughout the last couple months of 8th edition. So the change in meta is oftentimes hard to keep up with. Hard to keep up with what is the strong units on the table for each army. What are you going to see when you go off to a tournament? And that's the one that's got me right now, is like trying to think about what to expect at the tournament that I'm going to this weekend, and that I'm going to be going down to in Las Vegas. Sorry, not LA. And the fact is that it's hard. It's hard to keep up with what everyone's bringing because it changes so fast. There was a winner. There was all these people griping about how Ynnari were dead to the world because of the changes that were made to Strength from Death, and someone took a Ynnari list and won a GT the last weekend or the weekend before in Virginia. So just goes to show you that maybe it's not dead. Maybe I'll be seeing a bunch of them down on the tables down in Las Vegas. Who knows? But the fact is that there usually is a meta. There is something strong that's going out there. I think I'm going to see a bunch of Chaos lists. I think I'm going to see a bunch of Guilliman. I think I'm going to see a bunch of Astra Militarum, Eldar, Tyranids. Basically, a lot of the Codex armies, I think, is what I'm going to be seeing a lot of. And that's the meta of right now. And to keep up with it is very difficult. It's very, very difficult. And if you were trying to just make counter meta lists over and over again, you would drive yourself crazy running in circles trying to find the perfect list. And let's just put it out there. There is no perfect list. And trying to tailor your lists to the meta is oftentimes foolhardy because it's going to change so fast that your list is going to be outdated by the time the ink dries on the paper. So the best bet to countering the meta, to figuring out the meta and keeping up with the meta, is to keep your ears open, listen to what people are talking about online or wherever it is. People talking about it in podcasts, on videos on YouTube, wherever it is. See what they're bringing. Listen to what they're bringing, listen to what they're saying about different armies, and just keep that in the back of your mind and understand that that's probably what you're going to face. But when you're making your list, what you need to focus on is how do you effectively make a list that can accomplish the objectives of the missions. So for instance, these next couple tournaments I'm going to are ITC tournaments. They're going to be using the ITC Champions missions. So I knew that I had to create a list that was going to be able to accomplish the missions in those packets, so accomplish the ITC missions. So in order to do that, you need to be able to get units all across the board. You need to be able to handle, you need to be able to hold on to objectives, and you need to be able to kill things. So if you're just jumping on objectives, you're only ever going to score half the number of points that you can per turn. But if you're only killing things and you're not getting across the board to the different objectives, then you're also only going to be getting half the objectives that you can possibly get during the missions. So I knew I had to have a good mix in order to do that. So I went out and I was like, what's going to be important to me? I think that what's important to me is I like running quasi gun lines. I like to create gun lines that are a little bit more mobile. I like to create. I like to have units that can hold back, stay back on objectives in the back line, and heave DACA down the board. But I also like to be able to get up in their faces, cause trouble, get in the way of their other units. So knowing how I like to play and knowing what I needed to do, I knew that having a solid fire base was going to be key to allowing me to accomplish what I needed to do in these objectives. So I knew if I needed to be able to have some long-range DACA that could kill things early in the game, and I needed to have some strong close-range DACA that had a higher volume of shots in order to kill things later on in the game as they got closer to me or as I got closer to them. And that's where I came down to having the dreadnoughts with the las cannons and then having the hell blasters. Between the two of them, there's very little that anyone can bring that I can't really handle. So if someone's bringing super heavy vehicles, those las cannons are going to do a number on them. But if someone's bringing something with a lot of invul saves, then the weight of number of the DACA that I'm going to be putting out with those hell blasters is phenomenal. And I knew that was going to be what I needed to. I knew that between the two of them, I had killing things down. I was going to be able to kill things early, and I was going to be able to kill things later on in the game. And regardless of where my opponent focused their fire, they weren't going to be able to take out both. Hopefully, unless things went horribly wrong, people weren't going to be able to take out both of those sources of DACA early on in the game, and that I would have the ability to hit back even if I got second turn and had a really bad first turn. So knowing that, I knew I had my killy things in store. After that, a big thing in 8th edition is buffing. So the ability to find synergy between your HQs and characters and your other units. So nowadays, HQs oftentimes, maybe with the Blood Angels is an exception. Right now, basically, HQs are not meant to be the beat sticks in and of themselves. Their greatest benefit in this edition is their ability to up the game of your other units. So, for instance, Ezreal now grants my Hellblasters a 4-up invul save. So regardless of what anyone's AP that they're shooting at them, 50% of the time, I'm making saves. He also grants them a reroll of their shots, so that doubly enhances a shooting army's abilities if you're going to be able to reroll your misses. Masters and Grim Resolve only lets me reroll 1s. Ezreal lets me reroll those important 2s as well, which is key. It's really key, especially when you've got an army out there that you need to get those shots in, because every shot counts and every shot needs to be doing wounds. So Ezreal allows me to further enhance the ability of especially my Hellblasters. I also have a tendency to roll 1s when I least need them. So, for instance, my las cannons and my plasma that's supercharged oftentimes are wounding things on 2s. If not 3s, but definitely usually 2s, if not 3s. So rolling 1s when they do that is tough, especially for las cannons and plasma that is supercharged and has Weapons of the Dark Age on there. You're talking about anywhere between 3 damage that I'm missing out on because of that roll of a 1 from my Hellblasters, or up to 6 damage for the roll of a 1 with those las cannons. So I knew that I wanted to buff them with the lieutenants, and they're cheap enough that I could get 2, so I could have the one with the Primaris that could stick around with Ezreal. So I've got, if worse comes to worse and my bubble collapses, they're pretty good in the combat phase. That's why I like to give them the power sword, because their job is not to increase my shooting ability. Their job is to stay back there and heroically intervene and try to save the day if the worst of the worst happens and people get into close combat with my Hellblasters or Ezreal, or God forbid Ezreal. Then on top of that, I have my other lieutenant who's going to stick around with my dreadnoughts, again with a power sword. So if people get into combat with them, he can jump in there and start killing away units to try to open them up for shooting again, and also to give them the reroll of 1 to wound. That way, I've got a better than average chance of wounding if I do manage to hit with those las cannons. So now I've got a list coming together. So I've got some HQs that I need. I've got my shooting ability. Now, a big thing is the fact that Deep Strike now is that you place them 9 inches away, it's not as dangerous to Deep Strike units in to try to assault people. And there's plenty of things out there that give them 3d6 charges. There's plenty of things out there that give them 3d6 charges. There's plenty of them out there that give them rerolls to charges. There's a lot out there that can get a charge off early round. And in order to defend against that, you have to use something, they call it the screening. With my Dark Angels, the best units to screen with are scouts. Because A, they're a cheap troop choice, so it helps me build that battalion without having to take away points from a lot of other stronger units. B, they can deploy anywhere on the table that's more than 9 inches from my enemy's deployment zone. So that allows me to reach out beyond just my deployment zone in order to block the enemy from charging in. So if I measure it correctly, I can make sure that there are no bubbles for them to drop their attacky units, their assaulty units. So if someone's got, Death Company with jump packs in Deep Strike Reserve, they're going to have to put them 9 inches past my scouts, who are going to be more than 9 inches away from my shooty units. So even if they get this charge off on my scouts, for 55 points, Jenkins will take this noble self-sacrifice, and then I can shoot those Death Company as they try to now chug their way across the table. Or it forces my opponent to just start in their deployment zone, which there are still ways of doing that, especially with the Blood Angels' abilities to scout and move and then charge, to get off those charges. And you're never going to be able to stop every single source of assault, but I can minimize those effects very well with scouts because of their ability to just control the table. And I can put them on mid-table objectives so I can scoop up some early objective points in the LVO mission. So if there's one mission we played against with the Chaos, there were 3 objectives, one in the middle, one in each of our deployment zones. So we could each hold our deployment zones relatively easily. But if we could drop that scout, if I was able to drop that scout unit right on the middle objective, and it was behind some line of sight blocking terrain. So first, second turn, maybe even third turn, they got me the extra point for the round for holding more objectives because they were able to sit on that objective, and he had to come up and he had to take them out with berserkers who were designed to not care about scouts. They were designed to go against my super strong shooty units. And then once they killed the scouts, now they were out there in the open getting ready to be shot at with the rest of my DACA army. So the scouts now fill a very key role strategically in my army, and they fill up a cheap troop choice to allow me to get those extra command points. So now I've got that. Then I knew that the thing that I've had experience with when I bring a lot of strong DACA is that it becomes easy to be overrun by hordes. So a ton of guardsmen or orcs or brimstones, whatever it might be, a ton of these guys just coming at you becomes very hard to take down with strong DACA, because an orc gets shot in the face with a bolter and gets shot in the face with a lascan. He doesn't care. He's probably going to die either which way. It doesn't make a difference to him which he's getting shot with. So I then brought those dedicated transports, the Razorbacks with the twin assault cannons. My previous list before chapter approved and the Codex came out had 4 of them in there, but the price went up on them, so I dropped it down to 2. But now I've got Storm Bolters on there, which is pretty nice. So it's got, they're pumping out within 12 inches. They're pumping out, what is that, 12 plus 16 shots a piece. That could do a number on a lot of hordes, because most hordes aren't durable. You know what I mean? Their strength is in their numbers. And if you can cut down their numbers quicker, you're in a better position to be able to do something about it. And I liked it on the Razorbacks because they're very mobile. They can move 12 inches when they're fully healed, and they can advance if I need them to jump into, for instance, if I need them to run into a table quarter for recon, if I need them to go over and bolster the side of, because someone jumped orcs where I didn't expect to see them, and I left a bubble where they could get through. Suddenly now these guys can shoot over there and bring the DACA where I need it to. So they're a very mobile source of a lot of DACA between them, and it's a strong unit for holding off hordes and whittling down hordes so that they don't gum up the works of my strong shooting units. So I had this, and I had some ability to control the table with my scouts. I had the ability to run up with my Razorbacks, and now I knew I needed to have something that could get into my enemies' end there. So if because even for the secondaries, if you want old school, you need Linebreaker. If you want recon, you need to be able to kind of get into those sectors. There's behind enemy lines. If I wanted to try to get that for a secondary, a lot of the secondary points involve you being in your enemy's deployment zone, in the enemy's side of the table. Also, if you're facing a lot of units, a lot of armies that have some strong artillery, so say you're facing a bunch of Astra Militarum, and they've got these artillery units sitting in the back there. They're going to keep shooting at you no matter what. They're just going to keep lobbing those things in your face until you can handle them. And most of my army isn't designed to go that far in with its killing capabilities. The exception of the las cannon, so I can hold off deploying them until I see where my opponent is kind of like setting up their castle, so I can go shoot them with my las cannons. But save that, I knew I needed the ability to get into my enemy's deployment zone to disrupt with their plans, such as what would happen if my plans got disrupted by units in my deployment zone, and also to try to go and jump on objectives in my opponent's deployment and the deployment zone, and just be a nuisance over there. And I used to run assault squads with jump packs to drop and hold them in Deep Strike Reserve and drop them down turn 3 to come and jump on objectives. And that was effective, but they would die pretty quickly because they're still just Marines, and they would cost a pretty penny in points wise to make sure that you could use them. So looking at it, someone recommended taking a look at Reavers, and I know a lot of people have not had a lot of luck with the Reavers, but I have, and I think the reason I've had the luck with them is because of my expectations for them. My expectations isn't for them to get into combat and just tear shit up. Like, that's not what I plan for them to do. Their job is to get into my enemy's deployment zone and cause trouble. Their job is to tie up important units. Their job is to get on objectives and force my opponent to pry them off in order for them to try to get those objectives, or just keep me from getting those objectives. And the more attention my opponent has to face on a 100-point unit that I've dropped in his enemy lines is less than he can focus on my stronger units that are going to be doing more damage to him. Because he can't ignore them. If you do ignore them, that's fine. I'm going to go up and tie up your shooty units. I'm going to go and sit on your objective and keep getting points. Sounds good. Either which way, I'm happy. So either they're diverting attention, or they're being a nuisance back there tying up units. And if they kill anything, bully. That's honestly, at this point, that's gravy. The meatloaf is them getting up in there and sitting on objectives and tying up enemy shooting units. So they were it was like 15 points difference for a 5-man Reaver squad to a 5-man assault squad. And I got twice the wounds, twice the attacks on most of them, if not more attacks, because I also got, because they had chainswords. Yeah, so it was like twice the wounds, twice the attacks. It was an easy choice for me to make, honestly. So now I have these Reavers, and I had tried one squad. Having 2 squads gives me more versatility. It gives me the ability to focus on different sides, and it also makes it harder for my opponent to then decide if I've got 2 units that are coming at him from different directions. So now I knew I had to put in the Reavers. So I put in the Reavers, and suddenly now, tactically, I felt I was good to go. And the rest was just tweaking units. So I put in a Dark Shroud to give that a -1 to hit to the big central Death Star unit of Hellblasters and Ezreal and whatnots over there. Because that -1 to hit makes a big difference. That's why Altiak is the go-to Eldar Craft World choice, because its -1 is a big difference. It makes a big difference. It suddenly means that plasma is overheating on 2s on you. It means that you can't get, it means that some units, if you've got them damaged down, can't shoot them at all. If you've got Lehman Russes down to their last profile, they can't shoot at that unit because they're -1. So now I put it in the Dark Shroud, and he sits back there. He's not super tough, but if I advance him, he now has a 4-up invul save because of Jink, and he can stick around for a fair amount of time. He's got like 9 wounds, toughness 6 or 7, 3-up armor save, 4-up invul save if I Jink him, if I advance him. And he just sits back there and sits by my main units, and provides them that -1 to hit bubble. And that allows me, again, talking about enhancing the ability of the rest of your army, they act almost like an HQ unit would in providing that important amount of buffing to the rest of my army there. And for the points, yeah, your opponent could probably take them down relatively quick, but then again, those are all shots now that they can't spend trying to shoot my Hellblasters. Those are all shots that they can't spend trying to shoot my my Dreadnoughts. So, regardless, at that point, the Dark Shroud is protecting that group of units, either by providing the -1 to hit, or by providing a distraction that keeps them from being shot at. So it became an easy choice at that point to throw them in there. And then I started thinking about it, and I tweaked my list to allow me to bring the Ancient, the Primaris Ancient, because again, I was already putting a lot of eggs in my Hellblaster basket. Why not make it more effective? Spending a few extra points to make them effective even when they die is huge, and there's nothing more frustrating to the opponent than losing units on their own shooting phase or their own phase. When they're supposed to be the ones that are dealing out the damage, it can get very frustrating to suddenly be shot at by supercharging plasma, because at that point they're dead. Who cares? You're going to supercharge them. And if I happen to blow them up by myself because of getting hot, so if I rolled a 1 and then re-rolled it into a 1, they get to shoot again. And if they had the Death of the Weapon of the Dark Age, it affects them for the entire phase. So that's still the phase, because it's just before they're removed from the board as a casualty. So suddenly now I've got that one guy gets to shoot twice what he normally would because of the addition of the Ancient there. And if I happen to roll well, I roll well, and that sounds pretty good. Azrael's Warlord trait is to roll to get back command points when you spend them on stratagems. So I've had games when that's come in that's done nothing for me, and I've had other games when that has done the world for me. So what we're gonna have to work on now is seeing, that's the one he has to take. So I've got no choice in the matter, because he's a named character, and that's just what they've done. That's what they've given him. But at the same time, I think it's pretty good, and it works really well in conjunction now that I've got a bunch of command points to spend it on. So so that's kind of what I've got. That's kind of how my army worked out. And what I'm long-winded way of saying this, the reason I went through that whole process there was, I don't know if you've noticed, but I didn't talk about a single I didn't talk about a specific enemy when I was choosing all of those units. And the reason I wasn't talking about a specific enemy is that when you're making your list, you don't need to think about what your opponent is going to be bringing. Because if you're going to a tournament, you have no idea what your opponent is going to be taking. That's kind of what it comes down to, especially when you go to a big tournament like an LVO. You've got 500 people, 499 aren't you. So you don't know what any of them are bringing. You might know what your friends are going to bring, but odds are you're not going to be playing them at that tournament. So trying to predict what everyone's going to play when you have no idea who you're going to play is counterproductive. And it's not going to do you any good to even try. But if you take the time like I did there to create a list that covers your bases, that allows you to handle the different archetypes of armies. So it lets you handle the hordes, it lets you handle the elites, it lets you handle the super heavies, it lets you handle the deep strikers. If you concentrate on handling the archetypes of units and basically creating a well-rounded list, that's the list that's going to do well at a tournament for you. If you have a one-trick pony and your list is designed to handle the Battle Bros and you're like, boom, I've got all the strong deck I could ever possibly use, and I'm going to be using it against his two super heavies that are coming at me flying across the board, and suddenly you come up against, the Green Tide, you're screwed. That's what happened to me the very first 8th edition game I played. I was buffing a whole bunch of las cannons with Ezreal, and I obliterated a mechanized Space Marine army the first round. Second round, I went up against the Green Tide, and I got run over. Literally run over. He ran across the board, ran over my units, and killed them. I took out his war buggies. I took out his trucks. But yeah, he battle wagons. But he ran me over with boys. And, that's what you can face. You have no idea. So even if you see what the meta is at this current moment, even leading into your specific tournament, it doesn't mean that everyone's bringing that. Not everyone is going to bring Spite Spam. Not every single Chaos team, force is going to have Magnus and Mortarion together, bumping fists and busting ass. That's not what you can't tell exactly who you're going to face. But what you can do is you can go into it to ensure that you can get the objectives for the missions. You can go into it knowing that you can handle generally enemy forces coming at you and that you have contingency plans and you have ways of ensuring that what you have planned for your army can actually happen. And if you start covering your bases and you start realizing that you create a well-rounded army that can do what it needs to win a game, that's going to do the best for you. And who knows, maybe you'll create the next meta. Because every single meta out there started with one person that came out and said, what about this? And it happened, and people saw it, really liked it, and went with it. That's how the metas start. That's how they build, Metas are crushed by rules changes, but metas start by someone stepping out there and going, this is what I'm thinking. I think it's a strong list. I think it's going to do well. And then doing well with it and showing that it actually does well. So basically, the answer for how to handle the meta is to listen to it, to know what's coming your way so that when you see it across the table, you know how to react. But to create a list that is going to be able to give you all of the tools necessary to win a match against anybody. Anybody. I don't care if it's Eldar across the table. I don't care if it's Magnus and Mortarion. I don't care if it's Gilliman sitting next to a whole bunch of Predators. I don't care. I've created a list that can win me games. And it's going to come down to the dice, and then me versus my opponent, And hopefully more so me versus my opponent than the dice. So if my opponent outmaneuvers me, he's going to win. If my opponent manages to find ways to counter all of my activities, she's going to win. But if I can manage to do the exact same, so if I'm able to take out his strong units that I know are going to be a danger to mine, if I'm able to keep his units from getting close enough to get off the charges that he wants, if I'm able to kill off his hordes before they manage to get in range to cause trouble for me, then I'm going to win. And that's going to come down to me being a better general than them. And that's how you win games. Lists don't win games. You win games. That's the bare truth of it. And all this time that we spend building lists is only to provide us with the tools necessary to be our best general. So I don't want to go into a match with a list that I don't feel is going to allow me to perform at my optimal level. If I'm dragging dead weight in a list, then I'm not going to be doing as well as if I had a list that operated the way I want it to and was able to do what I wanted it to on the table when I'm making those decisions. So that's how you counter the meta, is by knowing what the meta is so that you can react in game to it, but also creating a list that honestly doesn't really care what the meta is. Create a list that's strong, create a list that can do everything you need it to, and create a list that's not a one-trick pony, and you'll probably do better in the tournament than if you tried to create the perfect anti-Magnus list, or you tried to create the perfect anti-Eldar list, or you tried to create the perfect anti-Horde list. Whatever it is, if you try to do the perfect anti-whatever list it is, you're going to do worse in a tournament than if you just went into that game, if you just went into it with a list that could handle whatever they want to throw your way. So, I hope that was interesting. What do you guys do? I know we've gone over what you guys do to build lists, what you go through, but how do you guys handle the meta? It changes so fast, and there's so many things that are popping up. I mean, the latest thing is now the new Demon Codex is coming up, and it's going to be shaking things up, and they're going to be using it at LVO. So suddenly now I'm probably not going to be seeing a whole bunch of brimstones, but now I have to worry about like brass scorpions deep striking 9 inches away from me. You kidding me? That's going to be tough. It's going to be brutal. But that's just how the Codex crumbles, I guess. What we got to face, and you got to see these different things, and it changes so fast. Like I said, the new Demon Codex is coming out this Saturday, and 2 weekends after that, I'm going to be facing it, I'm sure, down at LVO. And there's so many people that are going to LVO that suddenly that changed, and their whole list that was based upon the Changeling giving the -1 to hit, and those Brimstones having a 6-up or 4-up invul save to create the screens that they needed, like that I was talking about, had that taken away. So now suddenly it's like if my scouts were 2 weeks before the tournament were told that they couldn't deploy out beyond the deployment zone, or if my Dark Shroud suddenly gave a feel no pain bubble instead of a -1 to hit. Not as helpful. And suddenly that would change my list, and I would have to change things the way it goes into. So I'm sure there are plenty of people out there right now that are sitting there trying to figure out what they're going to do and how they're going to change their list to work to do what they want it to do. Because the reason those Brimstones and the Changeling were in those lists were not because, they fell in love with those units necessarily. It's because those units were doing something that they wanted them to do. So the reason I bring a las cannon as opposed to a las gun is because it does something better for me that I want it to do. So they were bringing those Brimstones, they were bringing those Changelings because they were doing something that they wanted them to do, and now they don't do it, so they have to figure out another way to do it. So your option is either you keep bringing it, and then you can't do what you want to during a match, which means that you're hampering yourself, or you figure out a way to do exactly what you wanted to do in a different manner. So, so let me know how you guys keep up with the meta, what you guys do, what you listen to. Do you run scenarios in your head? Do you just kind of listen to what's going on so you have a general idea of what's happening? What's your process? And keep the conversation going, because I would love to know. I would love to hear what you guys think and hear what you guys have to say about the meta, and what do you think that you're going to be seeing in tournaments here in 2018 going forward? Honestly, I think we're going to see a whole lot of different things going forward, because each month that the new Codexes come out, it changes things drastically. I don't think that you would have seen a whole bunch of Dark Angels armies going to LVO before December. And now that the Dark Angels Codex is out, I think it's one of the strongest ones out there, and I think it's going to have a lot of people doing really well with it. So we'll have to see what happens going forward. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you guys think that I should be worried about for LVO. I would always appreciate the help, or even what I should be worried about in Siege of Augusta. So any of you guys up there at Augusta know what I've got coming my way, let me know. And I think there might be still spots left. So if you guys are hearing this and you're in the general area or within driving distance of Augusta, check it out. Check out the Siege of Augusta. I think just check it out. See what happens. I think there might be some spots left available. And if not, you can still talk to. I know that Friday they're doing like a Champions of Corn event with HQs. And there's something else I think going on maybe Friday. I'm not sure. But so if you can make it, give it a shot. See what happens. It sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm pretty excited. First place is the first place prize is actually going to be a Fire Raptor. So I'm pretty excited about that. I might end up coming back with a new project to be doing here on in my thin coats. My thin coats, I got the green down and I got the red down on my bolter, so I'm pretty happy with that. That's a pretty decent amount of work in whatever time this has been. But let me know what you guys are thinking. Tell me your ideas. Tell me what you guys have been doing to try to counter the narrative, to counter the meta. And I mean, some of you may not care about following the meta or facing the meta because all you play is your friends, and that's totally cool. That's totally fine. But then again, your friend gets a new Codex, you probably have to figure out what he's going to be bringing there the next time you guys play. So, those are my ideas, and I hope you guys have all enjoyed it. I certainly have. I have been Phil, the Glacial Geek, as always, and until next time, have fun.